Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are at the start of the August 2036, just past the trade deadline. Our Buffalo Wings are in first place in the National League East, 2 games up on the Braves, 2.5 up on the Phillies. And as we think about these final 2 months of the season with our 58-44 record, we've got several goals that we are thinking about. First and foremost is to get back to the playoffs for a 9th consecutive season. I think we're in very good shape to do that. Second is to win the NL East for a 4th consecutive season, given that our Pythagorean record is a lot better than our actual record. And you can see we are 3rd in the majors in runs scored, 2nd in the majors in ERA. Feel pretty confident that we're going to play even better over these final 2 months of the season than we have over the first 4 months, and that we will win the NL East again. Third goal for this team is going to be more challenging. We've also had the best record in baseball 4 consecutive years. We're 6 games behind Baltimore as August begins for the best record in baseball, and Nashville, Toronto, Seattle, Las Vegas, and Colorado all have better records than us as well. So I'm not going to say that it's impossible, but I think it would be an upset at this point if we actually finish this season with the best record in baseball and home field advantage throughout the playoffs. But that is certainly another goal. Clearly, even if we don't catch all of those teams in the American League, we're 5 games behind Colorado for the best record in the NL, and certainly having home field advantage throughout the National League playoffs would still be something. So outside of those goals as far as the team record, what else do we want to see? Well, we want to stay healthy over these final 2 months of the season so the team is in the best position possible when the playoffs start. Right now, only our closer, Pat Mems, is on the IL. We were very conservative with the 31-year-old. You can see he's actually back healthy from his injury. He's still got 8 days left on the IL. Given that he's fragile and given that we're playing really well, just didn't want to push him. And hopefully we'll be just as healthy when we do finally get to the postseason. That's a big goal for these last couple months of the season. And 2 other goals. One is to maybe see Dashawn Seifu have a good enough regular season that he'll finally win an MVP award. He's on his way to leading the National League in steals for a 9th consecutive season, and he's also easily leading the National League in batter WAR right now, having just a fantastic season, hitting .325, 62 out of 66 stealing bases, 37 doubles and 11 triples already, 86 runs scored, 145 WRC plus, and that league best 5.6 WAR. Would certainly love to see him get up over 7 WAR by the end of this season. If he gets to 7.5, I think there's a good chance that he will be the most valuable player in the National League, which would be kind of cool for a guy that we drafted number 1 overall many seasons ago. And as far as other goals, Seifu is going to be a free agent at the end of this year. And we have Shamar Jenneret, who in 2.5 seasons with us has won a World Series MVP award and a National League MVP award while leading the league in ribbies both seasons. And our hope is that after he just won National League Hitter of the Month for July, he finishes up the year strong, because he will have the opportunity to opt out of his contract after this season. And there is a part of me that, despite him being the most devastating force in our offense, and that includes Seifu, that there's no way for us to really realistically retain Seifu unless Jenneret opts out. So there is part of me that hopes he has a monster finish to the season, hopefully helps us win a 2nd World Series in his 3 years with us, and then he opts out for more money. because that would make it much easier for us to bring Seifu back next year. But we will see how those things go over these next couple of months as well. Before we get things started, also going to check in on a couple of our top prospects. We're asked in the comments to the past episode what was going on with Alexis Mendoza, number 19 prospect in baseball, 4th round pick in 2032, who's developed really well. Unfortunately, you can see about 3 weeks ago he had a torn labrum in his shoulder, and he is done for the year. Finishes 5-7 with a 4.65 ERA in AAA Albany. Did strike out well over a batter an inning, but gave up a sickly 16 home runs, and his BABIP of 335 was relatively high. Still above average in terms of his ERA plus and his FIP minus, and his SIERA was almost 2 runs below his actual ERA. So some good things coming out of this season with his stuff, movement, and control all above average, and all potentially having the opportunity to get better according to our scout. Just hope that he has the same profile that he does now when we scout him again in the spring after he recovers from this injury. And although he won't be available to help us this year, hopefully next season he will be an important member of our team. And then Joe Gallagher, the right fielder, who has had a meteoric rise through the minors after being a 9th round pick in 2034 out of the University of Central Missouri. Hitting .263 with 48 homers and 102 ribbies in 384 at-bats in AAA Albany. We're still trying to get his very mediocre defense as good as it can possibly be. He's playing in right field right now. We're not going to love playing him in right or left, or at first for that matter. But with that potential home run power, if Mr. Generette does opt out, I feel that we've got a pretty good and much cheaper potential replacement for him next season. But there will be a lot that will hopefully happen between now and the end of the postseason, when we'll find out whether or not Generette will opt out. Could certainly see Gallagher when we get to roster expansion in September. And there's no guarantee that there won't be a way for him to potentially even get onto the playoff roster if he's impressive in September when he makes his likely major league debut. So we'll see how things go. But that's kind of the plan here and the hopes here as we begin the month of August. And we've simmed ahead to the middle of August, although we just lost 2 out of 3 at home against Philadelphia. It's been a pretty good month with a lot of W's on the board for the Buffalo Wings as we sit here on August 18th. We're up 3 on Philadelphia and 6 on Pittsburgh. The .581 winning percentage that we have is now just 1 game behind Colorado in the standings. We've got 2 games in hand against them. If we win both of those, we would be tied with them for the best record in the National League. Generette up to 90 ribbies. I had mentioned in the last episode that I thought there was no way possible that he would catch Tatis Jr. to lead the league in ribbies for a 3rd straight year. But he has been a monster of late and is only 10 back now, so it certainly can't be ruled out. Seifu still leading the league in steals. His lead in batter WAR over Max Clark of Pittsburgh is only 0.6 of a game at this point, so he hasn't been quite as good recently. Taking a look at the stats, batting average down to .317. Still has been caught only 4 times this season, up to 41 doubles at this point. Looking at some of the league leaders on the pitcher side, Alexis Barajas still leading the league in ERA. Carrillo still leading the league in wins, and Barajas is 2nd now, and Barajas is up to 3rd in the National League in pitcher WAR here as we approach the dog days of summer. And we've made it to September 1st now, and roster expansion. This will be the first year that we go up to 30 players rather than 28, so we'll have the opportunity to bring 4 guys up from AAA Albany, which should hopefully give our team a nice boost and also let us see some people we wouldn't see otherwise. We're still in first place, but we're only half game up on Atlanta, who has won 13 in a row at this point. 3 up on the Phillies, 8 up on Pittsburgh, and we're still a game behind Colorado for the best record in the NL. Seattle at 83 and 48 has the best record in baseball at this point, and that means that they are 7.5 games ahead of us. So it would be quite a feat for us to get past them, plus the other teams that have better records than us, which also include Nashville and Colorado over this last month of the season. So hopefully we will hold on to win the NL East and at least not have to play in a wild card series. And I still think there's a reasonable chance if we do that that we'll end up at least with the best record in the National League, which would be good. Jenna Rett now only 5 ribbies away from leading the league, which is positive. Seifu obviously will easily lead the majors in steals. Unfortunately, Seifu's bid to lead the National League in batter war and potentially bid and win an MVP award seems to have taken a bit of a hit. Max Clark, the center fielder from Pittsburgh, only a little behind him, having a brilliant year, hitting .301, 31 homers, 76 ribbies, and he's also a pretty good defensive center fielder. Perhaps more importantly, though, catcher Luis Ortega from the Phillies, hitting .294 with 27 homers and 84 ribbies, 6.2 WAR on the season, as he's also a pretty good defensive catcher, only 25 years old. Clearly, if we end up winning the division over both the Phillies and the Pirates, that will likely help Seifu a little bit in the MVP voting. But at this point, I think he probably is going to need a real strong September to win the award. That said, he's still having a brilliant season, .313 batting average, already has 102 runs scored, and 73 of 77 on the base paths, 130 WRC plus, but that's fallen by 10 or 11 points over the last month, so he clearly has not been as productive as he previously was. Barajas looks like he's still going to run away with the title for the best ERA in the National League, and Barajas and Carrillo are now tied for second in the National League in wins, and Barajas is third in the National League in pitcher war as we head into the final weeks of this 2036 regular season with a 75 and 55 record. And we've made our decisions on the 4 players that are going to join the Major League roster for these final few weeks of the season. Did notice that our fan interest has dipped below 100 for the first time in quite a while. I guess the potential for a 9th consecutive playoff appearance and a 4th consecutive NL East title and a crazy pennant race going on in the NL East right now is not enough for the fans in Buffalo to be satisfied. But it is what it is, I suppose. Pitching-wise, no surprises. Mike Waters, we brought back up, the youngster who we basically only sent down when he got caught in a numbers game when Mems came back off of the IL. And then we also brought back Matthew Wenzel, the left-handed pitcher. Both of those guys' spots ultimately ended up in jeopardy when Elvin Jimenez and Cameron Johnson joined the team before the trade deadline. Jimenez has been pretty solid. Cameron Johnson has not been good thus far for us. 13 innings pitched. He's walked 11 batters and allowed 13 hits. So a whip of 180. Clearly not going to get the job done. Lineup-wise, as far as everyday players, we brought up Alejandro Mercado, former Rule 5 pick who's been in the minors for all of the last 2 seasons at this point. We've got him, so he should be a pretty interesting and versatile utility infielder down the line. Don't know that he's ever going to hit enough to be a big-time player, but as someone who could potentially be the 26th man on our roster, I think there's potential that he would hit enough and be able to play decent defense in enough positions that there could be some value there. And then we also did bring up Joe Gallagher. Ended up having a monster year in AAA, 257 average, 59 home runs, and 487 at-bats. Also walked 84 times. Still has some development that he needs to complete. We're only going to be playing him against left-handed pitching as a starter. Hopefully he'll get some pinch hit at-bats as well, but we're going to put him right into the number 5 hole in the lineup against left-handed pitching and see what he can do, because if Jenneret does opt out of his contract with guys like Flores, Gallagher, and Edwards, feel like we've got plenty of other right-handed hitters who are kind of DH/first base/corner outfield types to ensure that although the loss will be significant, we've got some at least cost-effective opportunities and options to potentially replace him. And it's been a solid start to the month. We took 2 out of 3 at Pittsburgh and 2 out of 3 at the White Sox in our first 2 series of September. So we're up 2.5 on the Braves now and 4 on the Phillies. Jenneret, I said there was no way he was going to lead the league in ribbies just a month and a half ago in game time, and he's now only 1 behind Tatis Jr. He also yesterday hit the 300th home run of his career after a pretty slow first half of the year, even though he did make the All-Star team. Looks like Jenneret, when all is said and done this season, is going to end up with a year that looks real similar to his first 2 years in Buffalo for us, which hopefully will help us hold on to that NL East potential title. And we're still a game behind the Rockies, and given that they took us out of the playoffs last year, would certainly prefer to have home field advantage against them and at least not end up having to potentially play 4 games in Colorado against them in a series. Although, to be honest, last year, although we struggled in Colorado, winning just 1 of 3, they took games 6 and 7 against us in Buffalo, so perhaps home field advantage against the Rockies isn't as important as I might be trying to make it. And another 4-2 week in the books for our Buffalo Wings, although we got there a little differently. Didn't win both series. We swept the Angels at home, but then we did lose 2 out of 3 to the Diamondbacks at home. Upcoming week, we've got 3 in Cincinnati and then 3 at St. Louis, followed by 4 at Philadelphia and 3 at Montreal. So we are on the road for 2 weeks solid before we finish off the month with a couple games against Atlanta. And then when we get into October, have another 2 against Atlanta and then 3 against the Mets. So a long road trip coming up that is likely to be pretty important in the playoff race, since we're only a game and a half ahead of Buffalo ahead of Atlanta at this point. We are Buffalo, and we're just a game behind the Rockies for the best record in the National League. The 91 and 52 Mariners are 7.5 ahead of us for the best record in baseball. So unlikely that we will catch them. Jenneret still second in the National League in ribbies. Tatis Jr. Has remained ahead of him the whole time. Seifu now second, still in batter war, but fallen behind the catcher Ortega. Barajas still leading the league in ERA, and he is tied for the league lead in wins with Carrillo and Alexis Furman of the Cubs, and he is still third in the National League in pitcher war as we head into the last 3 weeks of this season. And we just finished up our worst week of the month, only a 500 week. We did take 2 out of 3 in Cincinnati, but then we lost 2 out of 3 at St. Louis. And now we are back within the division for the rest of the season. As I mentioned 4 against Philadelphia and 3 at Montreal this week, followed by 4 against Atlanta and 3 against the Mets at home. So we're 3.5 up on Atlanta and 4 up on the Phillies at this point. So clearly can do some damage against the Phillies in this upcoming series. We're on the road, so you would argue that's going to work against us. If we can take 3 out of 4, that would be huge. Quite honestly, with games getting to be limited in how many of them are left, if we just take 2 out of 4 in Philadelphia and maintain a 4-game lead on them, that's probably going to be sufficient to ensure that the Phillies won't get past us for the NL East title. And then the 4-game homestand that begins next week, or the 7-game homestand that begins next week with 4 games against Atlanta, could ultimately be critical in determining who ultimately wins the division. Ortega of Philadelphia having a monster finish to the season. He's almost a win above Seifu in batter WAR. Seifu batting average down to 308, so no guarantee that he's going to hit 300 this year. Jenneret now leading the league in ribbies. Maybe that increases the likelihood that he'll ultimately opt out. He's also second in OPS, or third in OPS at this point. I believe he was second a while back the last time we checked in. Taking a look at the pitching leaders, Barajas still leading the league in ERA. Barajas and Carrillo now a win behind Pierce George, and Barajas still third in the league in pitcher WAR. So we're having some good seasons. Basically at this point, just want to keep the team healthy, ensure that we win the NL East, and we are still only a game behind Colorado for the best record in the National League, so getting past the Rockies would be a nice thing to do as well. Their magic number is only 3 in the NL West, so it's conceivable maybe they take their foot off the gas a little bit once they've clinched the division, while we're likely to be battling the Braves a week from now with the division still on the line. So maybe the fact that we've got more to play for in the division will work out in our favor, and maybe if we win about 10 of these last 14 games, get up to 96 wins or so, that's probably going to be enough to have the best record in the National League. And we finished up that 13-game road trip. We split the 4 games in Philadelphia, and then we did take 2 out of 3 against Montreal. So ultimately we were 7-6 on the road trip. Not a fantastic record, but anytime you can be above 500 on the road, especially for a long 2-week long road trip like that one was, is probably not a horrible thing. 1 week left in the season now. We're back at home, 4 against Atlanta, 3 against the Mets, going up against our old friend Ollie Ostendorf in the first game today. Let's see what Ollie's done this year. And he's actually had the best season of his major league career, 13-9 with a 3.60 ERA. Still walks too many batters, but he's fixed the home run issue that had plagued him the first couple years of his career, put up a 2.7 WAR. So good to see the guy who we ended up picking second overall many years back finally having some success at the major league level. Taking a look at the standings, we've clinched a playoff spot now, and we are up 4 on the Braves and 6 on the Phillies and 8 on the Marlins with 7 games to go. Colorado at 90 and 66 is only half a game ahead of us now. So it's conceivable that we get by them for the best record in the National League. We're going to need to finish up strong. I had mentioned, felt like if we went 10-4 over those last 14, we'd get where we needed to be. At this point, though, that means we need to go 6-1 in these final 7 games at home to get to 10-4 in those last 14 games. So that's certainly not going to be an easy task, but it's not impossible for a team that's as good as ours is. And we split the first two games with Atlanta, 5-0 shutout for us above beating Ostendorf. Then we lost 2-0 with our ace Barajas on the mound. Just won 9-6 today on the first day of October, and that has clinched the division for us. So 4 games to go. We will be NL East champions for a 4th consecutive season. And we are now also 2 up on Colorado, who seem to be packing it in now that they have clinched the division. So although we won't have the best record in baseball for a 4th consecutive season, we'll at least have the best record in the National League for a 4th consecutive season if we can hold off the Rockies over these last 4 games. And we won the last game against Atlanta and the first game against the Mets. So we are playing well now. I have a 2-game lead on Colorado with 2 games to go. That said, I did just look at the season series, and we only played once. Colorado beat us 2 out of 3. So we still need to win 1 more game to clinch the best record in the NL. If we end up tied with them, Colorado will have the home field advantage by virtue of taking the season series from us. So still need to win 1 more of these. Hopefully it will be today, and then we will be able to pitch whoever we want the final game of the season and rest our top starters rather than having to potentially send somebody that we want to use for the playoffs out there to start and perhaps not have them ready for a eventual division series game. And unfortunately, we lost to the Mets and the Rockies won. So we are only 1 game ahead of the Rockies. If we lose the final day of the year and they win, they will potentially have home field advantage over us for the NLCS. The bad news / good news is that our ace, Alexis Barajas, is lined up to go today. So feel like Barajas can likely get us the W today. But what it probably also means is that he won't be available for Game 1 of an NLDS. We'll probably have to go with Shazier in Game 1, followed by Barajas in Game 2. So it will set us back a little bit, but given that we have definitely had some challenges with the Rockies in the playoffs in recent years, most notably and most significantly last season when they took us out as we were trying to defend our World Series championship. Even though we had home field last year and that didn't work out for us against them, I really want to have home field advantage against them. So we are going to pitch Barajas here. It'll stink that he likely won't be ready for Game 1 of the NLDS, and it's probably not a good thing that I'm already thinking ahead to the NLDS that I'm already thinking ahead to the NLCS rather than focusing on getting this team ready for the NLDS. But we'll have him in a Game 2 no matter what. So we are going to pitch Barajas today on the final day of the season and see if he can ensure that we're going to have the best record in the National League. He's going to easily lead the league in ERA unless it's an absolutely disastrous game. Even if he gets the win today, though, he won't end up leading the National League in wins this year. Looks like Pierce George probably will end up winning the Cy Young over Barajas, but I guess if Barajas has a great game today, he can at least make things interesting. But those 332 strikeouts by George and the most wins in the league, probably along with the best pitcher war, will attract some voters his way. Interesting that Drake Purvis, former member of our team who we used in the trade to bring Barajas on board, has had a real nice season for the Marlins this year as well. And the worst scenario possible for us in game 162, we pitched Barajas, lost to the Mets in 10 innings, and the Rockies won. So a fourth straight win for the Rockies to finish the season. We lose 2 in a row, so we finished tied with them for the best record in the National League, which means that the Rockies, by virtue of taking 2 out of 3 against us, will have home field advantage over us if we end up meeting them in the National League Championship Series. Barajas was not really that good. 9 hits and 2 walks and 4 earned runs over 5 innings. Mems, the closer, took the loss. So not the way we wanted to end the season. We do end up thinking about the goals we set at the beginning of the episode. In the playoffs for a 9th straight year, winning the NL East for a 4th straight year. But we don't have the best record in baseball. Although we're tied for the best record in the National League, we will not have home field advantage all the way through the NL playoffs if we have to face Colorado. Jenneret did really bounce back over these final weeks of the season, led the National League for a 3rd consecutive year in ribbies since we brought him on board with 131. Also had 36 homers, hit 281, so the batting average a bit lower than in the past, but still a big-time season. He's going to be making $38.5 million a year for these next 3 to 4 years, depending on whether he opts into the final year of the deal. Coming off of his 3rd consecutive year leading the National League in ribbies, and his 4th consecutive year leading the league that he played in ribbies, with 2 MVP awards and a World Series MVP in those last 4 seasons as well. It's conceivable that he opts out thinking he can probably get a 7 or 8 year deal with somebody rather than the 4 years of contract certainty he has with us. So will be interesting once the playoffs are over to see what Jenneret does. Seifu ended up 3rd in the National League in batter WAR. So probably, unfortunately, not going to be an MVP season for Seifu, but another absolutely incredible season. Led the league in at-bats, runs, hits, doubles, and stolen bases, although over those final weeks of the season, his efficiency went down pretty significantly. Hits 300 for a 4th consecutive season. As we've talked about, he led the league in steals for a 9th consecutive season with those 86 steals. That's the 3rd best figure of his career. Led the league in doubles for a 2nd time, hits for a 5th time, 4th year in a row, at-bats for the 5th time, 4th year in a row, and runs for a 4th time, 2nd year in a row. So another monster season from Mr. Seifu. That 6.5 WAR is the 2nd highest of his career. He was the runner-up for MVP a couple years ago. Certainly would expect him to be one of the top 3 this year, likely along with Max Clark and Luis Ortega, but tend to think he probably will not end up winning the MVP award. We thought a couple months ago that he had a reasonable chance at earning. Barajas still ends up leading the National League with that 2.39 ERA, 17-7 record for our ace. And Barajas also ends up 2nd in the league in pitcher WAR. Interesting that his pitcher WAR went up from 6.4 to 6.6, despite that rather poor outing he had in the final game of the season. That's interesting to me. I guess maybe there were just an insane amount of runs scored on the last day of the season or something. Not really sure how the math behind that worked, but still a nice season for Mr. Barajas. And taking a look at our team statistics here before we finish up the episode and start preparing for the postseason. We ended up going 17-11 in August, 16-11 in September, and 3-2 in October. So basically, did play 600 ball down the stretch as we were hoping this team might. Ended up second in the National League in runs scored, but we were in the top handful of most offensive categories. The only exception being home runs, where we still ranked sixth. And pitching-wise, a dominant pitching staff in the top handful of every category, including leading the league in runs allowed, leading the league in fewest home runs allowed. We were sixth in strikeouts, which was our worst ranking there. Ended up third in defensive efficiency and ninth in zone rating. Our 94-68 record was 8 games below Pythagorean expectations based on our excellent offense and our excellent pitching staff. But when all was said and done, we only won 94 games. If we had gotten to that 102, we would have just edged out Seattle for the best record in baseball. But it was not meant to be this year. Kind of a really weird setup where all 4 of the wild card teams are from the NL East this year. Phillies, Braves, Marlins, and Mets. So we will ultimately be facing someone we are very familiar with in the NLDS. And given that we are going to technically be the number 2 seed, I believe it will be the Braves or the Marlins. But let's take a look at the playoff tree here. And yes, it'll be the Braves and the Marlins going after Colorado, supposedly. Oh, I did the math wrong. Yeah, of course. We would be the team that would be potentially playing the better team, since we were technically third. So it would be the Phillies or the Mets for us. Or we were technically second. If I could speak, that would help, but I'm struggling with that. So it's probably time to finish up the episode. Next time around, we will find out exactly how these Buffalo Wings are going to do here in the 2036 playoffs, especially now that I've given over management back to an AI manager. We'll see if perhaps the AI managing can do better than I have last year in the playoffs, and hopefully guide this team back to a World Series and hopefully to another championship. And we'll find out how we do in the postseason in our next episode. And we're going to have some interesting decisions to make at the top of that episode to figure out what our postseason roster will be. And we will tackle all of that next time around. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.